Hello everyone, my name is Gabby, and welcome back to another Dragon Ball Super review. This time reviewing episode 93. While everyone suitably freaks out over Goku's idea to use Freeza as the 10th member, Goku explains that it could work. He'll use Uranai Baba to bring him back to life for only 24 hours. Frieza wouldn't want the universe erased, and if he betrays them, then him or Vegeta can just defeat him easily. And when Whis explains just how powerful some of the other opponents might be, the others realize it may be their best chance. In the meantime, now Kaba has taught Cauliflower how to go Super Saiyan, Cauliflower tries to teach her protege Kale. And Kale's frustrations over being a burden, as well as jealousy over Kaba, seem to make the transformation trigger for her a little bit too well. Back in Hell, Goku meets up with Freeza and explains how he can get him out of there. Freeza agrees to join the tournament, but only on the condition that if they win, they'll at least use Earth's Dragon Balls to revive him. Goku agrees. Frieza is coming back. So, what did I like about this episode? Well, first of all, I'm just going to be frank here. The idea of Frieza coming back and Frieza being the 10th member of the tournament is still something that doesn't particularly interest me, even if it is somehow implemented really well. But what I did appreciate about this episode is that it did implement the idea of Frieza coming back for this tournament and Frieza being on the hero side, at least competently enough to the point that I can actually understand that these characters are doing it and understand that this is happening. Like, for one, everyone does seem to very much acknowledge that Frieza is both incredibly evil and really not very trustworthy at all. Goku kind of appreciates that as well. He's pretty much like, yeah, I know that Frieza could easily betray us, but if he does, I'm stronger than him, so I can deal with him, and so can Vegeta. And on Frieza's side, it doesn't look like Frieza has easily just given up on his desire to try and kill Goku, even if he's not just trying to say, like, immediately catch him off guard the moment he gets freed from that cocoon. The biggest concern I had about this entire thing about Frieza coming back was that Goku was going to treat Frieza like some kind of best friend that he'd never met in ages, and he'd always just really wanted Frieza to come back. Whereas here it was more just like, yeah, I know this is kind of almost a risky move, and I know that this isn't necessarily the best decision, but I think it's probably going to work out best for us in the long run. And I do know who Frieza is, and I'm not immediately going to be besties with him because he's strong or whatever. And the one idea about Frieza being a competitor in this tournament that I actually legitimately enjoy in his own right is that it adds a bit more moral ambiguity to the Universe 7 team. While I do honestly enjoy all of the characters who are going to be participating in the tournament for Universe 7, the one problem about a lot of them, as a collective, is they're all very kind of clean. In that they're all very much going to fight for the sake of all the people that they care about. But the fact is, we kind of have three characters whose sort of primary motivation is to try and be a good father. It was one of the things I was honestly kind of worried about when this tournament started, in that, if all of these characters' motivations are kind of the same, that they want to protect the people they care about in their universe, how are they going to make any of these characters kind of stand out from each other? The most morally ambiguous one out of all of them was probably Android 17, and even then, Android 17 was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of the animals in that space poacher spaceship. But Frieza has no pretense of being a good guy or even really trying to help people that he cares about. All he really cares about is himself. So he's fighting for the sake of himself and for the sake of having himself be alive. So it is something that's a little bit different, and it does make the Universe 17 feel a little bit more interesting. As for what I didn't like about this episode, well, first of all, in terms of Frieza coming back, there is one thing that is still kind of griping me a little bit, or at the very least in terms of the context of this episode and how it was handled. I didn't really have any problems with the way they had Goku suggest Frieza for the tournament. I didn't really have any problems about how everyone was kind of eventually sort of willing to accept it, although I did sometimes wonder if the people who were actually killed by Frieza would have protested at least a little bit more. No, honestly, the issue I had was the way that Frieza agreed to this. I understand why Frieza wants to join the tournament. He wants to get out of hell, and he's going to do anything he can to do that. But, well, first of all, just disregarding the fact that I was personally thinking that Frieza might actually want to see the universe destroyed, if that means that Goku is going to die. The other thing is, the way that Frieza kind of negotiated this was kind of unusual, because I almost just felt like he negotiated a deal, but then the deal was kind of very much heavily weighted in Goku's favor. All that Frieza really wanted in return for fighting in the tournament was just having used the Dragon Balls to wish him out of hell and wish him back to life if they win the tournament. And disregarding the fact that that technically Earth's Dragon Balls won't actually be able to revive Freeza for a second time, because Freeza obviously has no idea that's even the case, the one thing that I'm kind of surprised about is the fact that that deal doesn't really mean that Freeza is going to 100% guarantee to be able to stay out of hell forever. Because the fact is, if Freeza comes back to life again, and then he tries to train again, and he tries to fight Goku again, it might just kind of end up exactly the same way as it did in Resurrection F. Frieza comes back, Frieza fights Goku, Frieza loses to Goku, Goku kills him, and Frieza goes back to hell. He's kind of gambling the last chance he's probably ever going to have to return to life on kind of a big hypothetical that the events of Resurrection F aren't going to be repeated even if he comes back to life again and tries to do the exact same thing again. And you'd think after literally 2 times coming back for revenge against Goku and having that end with him dying, that he'd try to do something at least a little bit different. Or at the very least try to demand something different other than just him coming back to life. I mean, really, he could have gotten anything. He could have asked a promise for Goku to leave him alone, or even immortality. For all I know, both Frieza and Goku have a whole bunch of sort of contingency plans as to what's going to happen when they expect the other person to inevitably betray them, but in this episode, until we actually get to see those contingency plans, I have to look at this compromise purely at face value, and at face value it looks like Frieza willingly deciding to choose a compromise where he honestly gets the shortest end of the stick, and for a villain, I'm kind of surprised about that. Also, Kale. I mean, the idea of female Broly isn't necessarily a bad idea, and they did kind of give Kale actual legitimate personality traits that show that she's not just a Broly clone, but the fact is, in this episode, for Kale's kind of first big introduction as a character and also as a fighter, almost absolutely everything that she does when she is fighting is some kind of reference to the first Broly movie, either visually or in terms of literally some of the quotes that she says. If you guys know me well, you might know that I'm not really the biggest fan of when Toei makes a whole bunch of kind of visual, nostalgic throwbacks to earlier parts of the series, and after Kale transformed, she was basically almost entirely that. It's honestly just really kind of annoying, because if they want Kale to be a legitimately good character, at some point they're going to need to have to let her stand on her own 2 feet, and not just be used solely as just the fact that she is a distaff counterpart to a movie villain for something that's not even canon. And besides some stuff to do with her relationship with Cauliflower, they basically didn't give Kale anything this episode that made her stand out from being something other than just Broly but female. And I'd rather that we had these characters actually be interesting characters and not just be gender-flipped versions of other characters who weren't even that interesting to begin with. So, as for next episode, well, the tournament is getting awfully close, but that's not stopping Frieza from getting some last bits of training in. And it also seems like the other universes are actually going to try and do something to stop Universe 7 from getting their team together in the first place. Now that itself actually does sound kind of interesting. It is kind of cool to see the other universes actually trying to do something to sabotage Universe 7. I don't think it's going to work just because, the tournament is a big deal and we're assuming Universe 7 is going to be there, but it will be fun to see, and it will be fun to see especially how Frieza reacts to it. So that was Dragon Ball Super episode 93. Well, I mean, for the stuff that I was legitimately worried about, and for the stuff that I thought were honestly terrible ideas in the first place, stuff like Frieza coming back and female Broly, at the very least the execution wasn't completely awful. I can at least understand why some of this stuff is happening and understand why it's happening the way it is. I guess the only issue I have is that this episode was basically just sort of pandering to the kinds of ideas that I was never really interested in the first place. I guess with all of the different kinds of fan service and pandering that this arc has, I guess there are bound to be a few of them that I'm just not really interested in. So this was bound to happen at some point. I guess my biggest hope is that the kinds of ideas that I didn't really care that much about, and the ideas that Toei haven't been doing a very good job at selling me of, are the ideas that aren't necessarily going to be holding up the tournament, holding up the main narrative of the entire story, as much as the ideas that I thought were actually legitimately interesting. But then again, I'm just one person, and I'm also one person with very unusual ideas as to what I like about this franchise, so I guess they don't necessarily have to please me. It would just make this arc a much more enjoyable experience for me personally when I'm actually watching it every week. So this is Gabby, signing out, and I'll see you all next week. Bye guys!